Everyone thinks the horror ended with Colonia Dignidad's leaders. They're wrong. The gates of Colonia Dignidad finally fell, and the world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The infamous cult, a Nazi-esque enclave in rural Chile, had been exposed for its decades of torture, child abuse, and political collaboration. Its leader, Paul Schaeffer, was finally brought to justice. But for many, the nightmare was far from over. This isn't a story about Schaeffer or his inner circle. This is about the silent children, the second and third generations born within those walls. They were the forced laborers, the indoctrinated faithful, the unwitting participants in a vast, sprawling conspiracy. Their stories, often overshadowed by the more sensational headlines, reveal a different kind of horror. Imagine growing up in a world where your parents weren't your parents, where your name wasn't your own, and where the outside world was a forbidden, dangerous myth. This was the reality for thousands. They were raised under an iron fist, taught to fear, to obey, and to forget. Paul Schaeffer, a former Nazi medic, established Colonia Dignidad in 1961. He promised a utopian German agricultural colony in Chile. What he delivered was a totalitarian regime built on psychological manipulation, forced labor, and systematic abuse, all hidden behind a facade of charity and religious devotion. Children were separated from their parents, often at birth. Families were fractured, replaced by an artificial hierarchy where Schaeffer was the ultimate father figure. Love and affection were rationed, controlled, or outright forbidden. This was how Schaeffer ensured absolute loyalty. Illy, a name we'll use for one of these children, remembers the constant surveillance. Even as a young boy, he understood that every word, every gesture was being watched. The walls had ears, and the ears reported directly to Schaeffer's security apparatus. He learned to suppress his emotions, to blend in, to become invisible. This was a survival mechanism, a silent protest against a system designed to crush individuality. But this survival came at a cost, one that would echo for decades. The children's education was a carefully curated diet of Schaeffer's ideology. History was rewritten, science was twisted, and critical thinking was purged. They were taught that the outside world was evil, corrupt, and a threat to their pure community. Forced labor began young. Children as young as 5 were assigned tasks from farming to laundry. There was no playtime, no childhood innocence. Only work, prayer, and the omnipresent threat of punishment. Punishments were brutal and public, designed to instill fear and conformity. Beatings, electroshock therapy, and solitary confinement were common. The goal was to break the individual spirit and reinforce Schaeffer's absolute authority. When the regime began to crumble in the late 1990s and early 2000s, many of these children were already adults. They had known no other life. The collapse of Colonia Dignidad wasn't freedom. It was an abrupt, disorienting plunge into an unknown abyss. The Chilean government's initial response was inadequate. Many survivors were left to fend for themselves, without education, without social skills, and with deep, unaddressed trauma. They were victims twice over, first by Schaeffer, then by the system meant to protect them. Reintegrating into society proved incredibly difficult. The simplest tasks, like using money or navigating public transport, were monumental challenges. Their language, their customs, even their understanding of human interaction were fundamentally different. Many carried the psychological scars of their upbringing. Trust was a foreign concept. Relationships were fraught with suspicion. The indoctrination, even after Schaeffer's fall, continued to echo in their minds, a constant whisper of fear and control. The legacy of Colonia Dignidad isn't just about the past. It lives on in the ongoing struggle for justice and recognition. Many descendants are still fighting for compensation, for therapy, and for answers about their true origins and stolen childhoods. The children of Colonia Dignidad were robbed of their identities. Some were forcibly adopted, their birth records altered. The search for their biological families continues, a painful journey of fragmented memories and bureaucratic obstacles. The Chilean government, belatedly, has made efforts to address these issues. Laws have been passed, commissions established. But for those who lost decades within the colony's grasp, these actions often feel too little, too late. The former compound itself, now renamed Villa Baviera, stands as a chilling monument. Some survivors still live there, attempting to build a new life amidst the ghosts of the past. Others have left, determined to sever all ties. The stories of the silent children are a stark reminder that the impact of cults extends far beyond the charismatic leader and the initial victims. It ripples through generations, leaving a legacy of trauma, displacement, and a desperate search for identity. Their resilience, however, is equally profound. Despite everything, many have found ways to heal, to form new families, and to advocate for others who suffered similar fates. Their voices, once silenced, are now slowly, powerfully emerging. The descendants of Colonia Dignidad remind us that true justice isn't just about punishing the perpetrators. It's about recognizing the suffering of all victims, especially those whose pain was hidden, whose voices were suppressed, and whose futures were stolen. Their ongoing struggle is a critical chapter in the broader narrative of cult recovery. It highlights the complex, long-term challenges faced by those who escape such totalitarian environments, and the societal responsibility to support their journey back to selfhood. The silence of these children was a weapon used against them. Now, their stories must be heard, understood, and never forgotten. Only then can their true liberation begin. Next, we delve into the terrifying mind of the cult leader, who believed he was immortal.